I would like to take an opportunity to welcome everyone on behalf of the Center for Migration, Gender, and Justice. We are delighted to feature this event as part of this year's Global Gender and Migration Forum, a shared global commons connecting knowledge, policy, and practice on migration and gender. As a multi-stakeholder mechanism, the forum facilitates collaboration across sectors and geographies, centering migrants' lived experiences and perspectives. Today's event on narratives, public perception, and media on gender and migration plays a central role in this, and we are very excited to learn from our colleagues today. We hope that you will continue to stay engaged with our work at the Center for Migration, Gender, and Justice, and continue the discussions that we've had over the past 2 weeks at the Global Gender and Migration Forum. I'm also happy to provide further information on what we may have planned for the future. And with these brief opening remarks and invitations, I will then pass this on to my colleague Chiara to officially begin moderating today's exciting showcase.
Thank you so much. So my name is Chiara. I'm a communication professional working at the ICRC, the International Committee of the Red Cross, and I'm very pleased to be your moderator for today's session. So as you know, today's conversation comes at a very critical moment. When we talk about migration, we often focus on policies, numbers, crises, but the stories about the people that we tell are also very powerful and important because the narrative shape how societies understand migration, who is seen as deserving of protection, and which policies gain support. These narratives are not neutral. They are deeply influenced by gender norms, stereotypes, and intersecting identities. And too often, media represent these stories in a simplified way, showcasing migrant women only as victims and overlooking their entire experiences, which are often shaped by race, class, age, or status. So the way we tell these stories have real consequences. They really influence public perception, they can reinforce biases, and ultimately shape policymaking. But these stories can also have a very important transformative power. They can humanize, challenge stereotypes, and open space for more inclusive and evidence-based approaches. So what we will do today is to explore how migration narratives are constructed, how gender biases shape these narratives, and how we can promote more inclusive, intersectional, and responsive storytelling. I really would like this session to be interactive, so please share your question in the chat as they come to your mind. We will keep checking and keep tracking of the question for later discussion when there is the Q&A session. And now let me introduce you the incredible panel of speakers that we have today. They come from very different backgrounds and perspectives. We have research, media, international organization. So today we have with us Professor Edita Fino from the University of Bologna, together with Alice Zenari, PhD student. We also have Martina Dominici, an expert in gender and migration, Marcela Gabiu from WACC Global, working on communication and media narratives, and Abigail Scottness from UN Women. Thank you so much, speakers, for being here today. Let's begin with the first showcase presentation from Professor Edita Fino and Alice Zenari. Let me just briefly introduce them a bit better. So Edita is a professor of social psychology at the University of Bologna. Her work really examines how perception and international and intersectional biases shape attitudes with the aim of informing policies and intervention that foster equitable and inclusive societies. And today she's joined by Alice, one of her PhD students who will present data from the studies conducted within the framework of her doctoral research project. So over to you, Alice and Edita.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. So I will quickly try to share my presentation. I hope it's not gonna be too dense. Do you see my screen, right? Yes. Do you?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so then we can start. So thank you so much for the presentation. I'm actually saying that Edita is going to join in a couple of minutes. It's just she had an institutional meeting that came up, as always happen. So me and her are focusing on the concept of intersectionality in the field of migration, and today we're going to discuss some of our studies that focus on gender gaps and intersectional biases in migration-related public perception and policy support. We really like the title of Invisible and Undeserving because in this construct of intersectionality, there are some people that end up having this compounded disadvantage that actually make them become invisible. So if I can go further, okay, yes. So as you started with the context, I'm actually repeating it quickly. So we are talking about migration people that are coming from difficult environment and they are already having a vulnerability due to their journey and the places they are coming from. But when they arrived in the country, they also find other difficulties because of opportunity they get, economic participation they don't have, but also social exclusion, discrimination. And this is reinforced by this simplified narrative you were talking about. To one side, we have some frames like them seen as victim. To the other one side, we have, for example, migrants seen as a threat to economic, culture, stability, and this has an impact of stereotypes. So these representation have an impact on public perception on how they are seen and also on policies both at a local and a national level. And we're talking about a lot of people. We have more than 304 million international migrants worldwide, 117 million of people forcibly displaced, and half of them are women and girls. Why it's important to keep this in mind is because academic literature centers male experience as the norm. So most of the research that has been done until now doesn't consider gender as a dimension, and most of the time see migrant as the whole category. So when is doing a study like how do you perceive this migrant, it will just ask that without explicitly saying if it's a female or if it's a male. And most of the time when they actually explicited, they use male as a prototype, and this create a gender bias in which we use male as the male prototype of all experiences, and we create invisibility to all the other parts. So female, non-binary experiences, they become less secondary in migration literature, and then we have an incomplete picture of what actually migration has. We don't have a comprehensive framework. And so there is limited intersectional analysis in research itself, is research psychology. And we don't analyze how social categories interact and create the distinct disadvantage we were talking about. So where does research stand right now? It stands in a place with most of research focus on ethnicity or nationality, but they don't combine these categories, and they treat migrants as an homogeneous group. So for example, we will have a study that is investigating, I don't know, Africans and Middle Eastern refugees, but we will not have that the study will investigate the difference between female and male or Muslim or Christians. And these differences exist because we are living in a really diverse environment with people like, and just an individual has so many different characteristics, right? These social categories do interact. So we need to change this approach. So this is why we're trying to do. So Edith and I, we are doing a research. We did 2 studies, one in Turkey with one of our collaborators and one in Italy, because we are based in Italy, but because in Turkey is one of the biggest migration routes where people pass by. Italy is at the Mediterranean, and we were interested in having the same type of populations to make a comparison between the two. In this sample, we are using refugees only. We are considering refugees only, sorry for the language. And we have as a target Afghani, Syrian, and Ukrainian refugees. And in the Italian, we have only Afghani and Ukrainian. And the Turkish study will focus on humanitarian assistance, and the Italian one on integration policy support. And they both try to analyze this intersectionality between ethnicity and gender. So now we're going to see what we have seen from the results from these 2 studies. So going to the Turkish study, so we had a scale, and we were asking people about how many resources will they allocate in the Turkish, how threatening were they perceiving these people, and how similar or distant were they perceiving to this related to Turkey. And to Italy, it was more about policy support, so how much Would you support with policies this type of population and humanitarian concern towards them? Towards Turkey is really interesting, the perceived similarity part, because of course, due to proximity, we have a big number of Syrians in Turkey, and they are the one they interact more. But when we ask them with which one of the three ethnicity they feel more similar in terms of values and identity, they will say Ukrainians. And we will see that the distance between Afghani and Ukrainian is really significant, and the Afghani group will end up to be excluded and marginalized compared to the other two. And then instead, when we'll ask them, how will you allocate the resources, we will see that the women group will be homogenized. So women will be not really considering resource allocating, and they will be treated in the same way depending on nationalities. This is in Turkey. And then instead, for men, there will be a strong difference, which means Ukrainians, Turkish people are more open to give resources compared to Syrian and Afghani, even if the Syrians are the ones they interact the most. So this is saying a lot about the fact that there is a difference due to the ethnicity, but also due to the gender, because this doesn't result in the woman category. If we look instead in the Italian study, we focus more on the concept of threat. And what is really interesting and a bit sad is the difference between Afghani group and Ukrainian group. So Afghani group is really seen as more threatening, and the threat that is seen the most is the symbolic threat, which is the threat related to cultural values, norms, which means Italians feel threatened that Afghani, especially men, because here we see the value is higher, will impact Italian values or identity. And then when we go to see the policy super resources still in Italy, here instead we will see that Ukrainian female are the ones that are more supported, which is really interesting and could be due to the fact that they are seen less threatening because of their gender that elicit more vulnerability, and at the same time they are Ukrainians who have the European traits. To the other side, though, we will see that Afghani female are the ones that stand at the lowest and they become invisible, as we were saying before. So when we go to see policy support related to labor market and access to mobility, we will see that Italians are open to give support to Afghani male, Ukrainian male and Ukrainian female, but will leave Afghani female behind. And the difference between the female is really significant statistically. When we check the education access and support, we will see that the trend is really similar. Afghani female are still the one that stay there, and Ukrainian female are the one in which we as Italians are more open to support. Health service, same trend. Permanent residence, same. And then we end up at the citizenship, and these results is really interesting because we will see that both Afghan male and female are left behind. And in the labor market, Afghan male were really high. So we will see that, for example, we are open to give policies to Afghan male to work in our country, but we are not open to give them the citizenship to actually integrate in the country. And we forget instead about Afghani female because they are already in their country. Unfortunately, they are left behind, and this sense of like not having this role of agency, it doesn't come when they come in the country itself, and there are no policies or no support that implements these, while Ukrainian female are privileged in this sense. So this was the main study, that was our quantitative study. And then thinking about the intersection of categories, we also start thinking, yes, but we are focusing only on refugees. There is also the difference between migrants and refugees we should consider in the social categories itself. So then we thought about the status as migrant, and then we realized that refugee has a definition, right, by law. So refugee is a person that has a well-founded fear due to persecution, while for a migrant, there is no legal definition. Does this create a difference in the migrants group itself, other than gender and ethnicity and other social categories? And some quantitative studies said yes, but we wanted to not give this input from default, but we wanted to see this coming out in a spontaneous way. So this is why we did a qualitative study in Italy, where we asked people to think about 10 characteristics about a refugee or an immigrant, and then we were dividing it by gender, and then they just needed to list it. And then we were asking which emotions this person elicit to you, and if you were thinking about a male and a female. And what we found was like reinforced to our hypothesis. because we found a male default bias when we're asking a person, are they thinking about a male or a female? Even if it's an immigrant or a refugee, they will say it's a male. And this is showing that female are not represented in research, they are not represented in the narratives, so they will be invisible even when people think about an immigrant, a male or a refugee. And then when we will ask about how they frame it, how they see it, to refugees, they will see them as a victim more than an immigrant. And then immigrant will be seen more as a threat than a refugee. So some words that came out were like unlucky, poor, mistreated, scared, lonely. And then some words to the threat part were arrogant, criminal, thief, drug dealer. So this was some example also to show you how we did the study. So it was literally just one question and then they were just listing words. And then also last one is the interaction between this gender and this status. So we see that yes, refugees are seen more vulnerable, immigrants are seen more threatening, and then in the subgroup itself, there are gender differences. So refugee woman is seen as more victim, refugee man is seen as more threatening. Is seen less as a victim and the opposite. So what are we taking away from this? I know it's a lot of information, but it's really difficult to put everything together. Is that ethnic hierarchy is pervasive. So the fact that Ukrainians are seen as the privileged refugee group or nationalities is also giving them more resource allocation or different treatment compared to other nationalities. We will see intersectionality is pervasive as well in migration policies and humanitarian assistance, and this effect have an effect on everyday life. And also the labels influence representations. So how we say, we name things, this also evoke different reaction. And this thing that the generic category is implicitly given to a male is really important because it's telling us where we need to act and where we need to change things. So what are our implication and future direction is for research to keep going beyond this single category, keep using intersectionality, using qualitative mixed method, qualitative and quantitative mixed method that capture different nuances of research and representation for policies. Try to give support to the marginalized people and have integration policies that address this marginalization. For example, from this study came out that Afghani women are invisible, also not only narratives, but also from the support itself they receive. And then the label, as I said, that shape public and political responses. And for future work in research, which is what we do, is go beyond to other countries, keep to extend to other intersectional social categories, and then do a study, which is actually what we are going to implement now, about narrative framing to show how changing the frame will actually change these perceptions, to give also a practical approach on how can we give a different representation that is not only male-oriented, but is also giving a voice to females and any other type of not male prototypes that there is. Thank you so much. And this is us. So this is Professor Fino. This is me. We are really open to any type of questions, discussion. We're really passionate about this, and also collaboration if someone is open to deepen in this concept, in this. Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Alice. Really amazing presentation. I really like all the research that you have done, all the data that you have shown. I think it's really impactful to see like the numbers, like 300 million migrants that are often invisible and that don't really have a legal definition, right? I think it was also like what stood out to me, which was not mentioned much, but still I think it's an interesting reflection. It's when you showcase that when women were asked how to allocate funding, they were more equal, more, yeah. And I think this makes us understand that it's also very important to have a gender balance and women presence when making these policies, right? Because we tend to be more equal, neutral. So super interesting. Thank you so much. And now let's move on to our second speaker, Martina Dominici. Martina is an international expert in gender and human rights with over 10 years of experience working on migration across different regions. And her work focuses in particular on ethical and gender responsive storytelling. So, Martina, the floor is yours.
Okay, so a few days ago, during the assembly, I have the chance to mention some of the most common patterns in media narratives on gender and migration. I'm very glad today that I will have more time to explore these issues in a greater depth, and most importantly, to share some key recommendations towards a more inclusive, ethical, and let's say gender responsive storytelling and reporting in general on migration. These recommendations and much more are included in an e-course that I developed last year while supporting a joint capacity building effort between two UN agencies, UN Women and IOM. I received permission from the UN Women representative that was involved in these initiatives and is also present to this session to briefly present the tool to you. So after discussing the narratives and recommendation, I will quickly introduce the tool. And if we will still have time, I will share a few insights from the pilot training for media professionals that I conduct in South Africa. Before starting, my question to you was about what if you think about the common, let's say, image or picture, the most common image or picture that you can find in an article about migration, what could it be? Now, I think I spoiled already, but usually most of the people think about something like this. Let's say if you are more sitting on the Western part of the world, probably it will be a big group, a bunch of men, young adults, crossing a border from a sea border or a land border. While if you're sitting more, let's say, in the east part, in the east side of the world, probably it would be a group of migrants, still men in working age, working in a male-dominated sector that, for example, could be construction or infrastructure. Seeing all this time, these type of images connect with article and information about migration led us to think that all migrants are like that, or most of migrants are like that. These are the migrants, as we were saying before, generalized categorization of migrants. But is this correspond to the reality? Based on data that we have, around basically in most of the parts of the world, around 50% of migrants are women and girls. Just to say that data on migration, if segregated, are usually binary. So here we will talk about boys and men and boys and girls and women. So what's happened during the narratives of migration in the media? Migrants women are usually underrepresented in media narratives. I read an article that was analyzing research that was analyzing several articles, for example, about migration in Europe, and was saying that only 1 in 4 migrants quoted or featured were women or girls. And if we think about migrants with diverse subjects, they are almost invisible. So from these narratives, the first key recommendation that I provide is to try to balance stories, to try to balance more the representation. And it could be done not only in terms of migrants, but for example, also thinking about the expert opinionists that we invite. We can include voices from different participants and from different genders. Another, let's say, common pattern that we can see all over the world about migration is about gender stereotypes. and frame and the way narratives are specifically framed. Let's say one of the most common gender stereotypes of migration, as this has been said already before, is that usually women are portrayed as victims. So here the connection with the recommendation, try to avoid always portray women as victims, try to refer to women as a vulnerable group or vulnerable by default. Women are not vulnerable by default. Usually women are portrayed as a passive recipient of protection or always related to their gender roles, about mother, about daughter, about caregiver, dependent of a man. And here the recommendation to try to reframe narratives and challenge stereotypes. How many articles have you read about women that are leader in their community, that are business women, that that have an active role in shaping the society? This could be done both with the story that we decide to tell, but also with the picture that we decide to showcase in the articles. And here there are just a couple of examples how it can be easy to reframe the narrative. Just scrutinize these visuals and pay a little bit more attention on the type of pictures that we accompany our articles. Another tips and recommendation that I want to provide, it's related to the use of gender responsive language. We often see articles about migrants, for example, domestic worker. They are often referred as helpers. They are also often referred as maid. If you think about it, maid is a term that is deeply rooted in historical imbalance of power. We can select words that are more neutral, for example, domestic workers, that acknowledge migrants' labor and dignity. Or, for example, in the stories we said before about the role of women as victims. It's happening in some story that can be victims of trafficking or victims of gender-based violence. But why, instead of using the word victim, we do not prefer the term survivors? That implies a resilience. Last recommendation that I want to focus on, just to say, I just selected few of those, 3, 4, in the tool that I said before that I will present. There are much more on this. The last one that I think it's super important is the way we represent gender-based violence. In the e-course, in the tool, you will find several recommendations on gender-based violence, but I will just list some of those. It's super, if you think about how usually story of gender-based violence are told, are narrated. Then one of key recommendation on gender-based violence is try to avoid to provide details on any specific accidents or experience of violence or of exploitation or abuse. Another suggestion is try to avoid to cite the exact number of survivors, because they often fail to reflect the full reality of gender-based violence. Do not ask individuals about their own experience of gender-based violence. This is all behind a story of re-traumatization. Do not seek for individuals that have experience of gender-based violence to interview. Avoid interviewing individuals that potentially could be at risk of gender-based violence without a proper preparation on how to handle the disclosure, and ensure that in case you conduct this interview, there will be appropriate referral pathways in the context. but also try to avoid the stereotypes in language, in the victim blaming, and avoid sensationalization of violence. I was saying all these recommendations and much more are included in a e-course. This e-course, it's free, it is publicly available. I will put you the link in the chat box at the end of my presentation. Is in the website on the Global Migration Academy. It lasts around 1 hour. We try to make it at, let's say, as much more interactive as possible. It's you have just to register, take a quick assessment, and then navigate and go through the course. And at the end of the course, you will also get a certificate. The course is divided in 5 different sections. In the first one, there will be an introduction, and then let's say some key concept, key terminology about gender and migration. About gender data, for example, that are also super important. I haven't time to focus on this yet. And there will be a full part about the experience of women migrants and migrants with diverse subjects, which type of challenges that they face, what happened in the country of origin during the transit and in the country of destination. These will be done through case studies and stories. So through the course, you will, let's say, wear migrants' shoes of 3 specific migrants for a while, and you will try to, let's say, migrate through them their shoes and see which type of challenges they will face from a gender perspective. And then there will be, let's say, the most important part. It will be also be done through a case study or scenario where instead of the shoes of the migrants, you will wear the shoes of the media professional in charge of interviewing a migrant. And you will have to ask yourself some specific question and try to think about how to organize the interview. And follow on this, you will have some recommendation. This one that I told you, I show you quite quickly, but there will be much more. There are around 10 or 15 different type of recommendation. And in the last one, in the last section, there are a broad list of challenges and tips on how to navigate the challenges that usually are common in engaging women journalists or journalists with diverse subjects. From the course, you can also download several, let's say, handouts, and one of those it will be guidance note with all the let's say explain the type of narratives, most common, let's say, pattern, mistakes of error that you can find, and key recommendation and a lot of examples, but a picture as I show you now, but also in terms of language and terminology. And lastly, yes, I still have time. I was saying that I want to provide some insights from the pilot training in South Africa. So basically, after developing this e-course, it has been done another, let's say, version for an in-person training or online training, in that case for hybrid, and was pilot in South Africa with, let's say, a mixed group of media professionals, university students, but also researchers and practitioners. It was a very interesting experience, and let's say what impressed me most that I want to share with you. It's how much the discussion focused around intersectionality. I didn't open, let's say, this topic now because I know it will be covered by other speakers, but the fact of the aspects of intersectionality needs a lot of discussion around it. And it's not possible anymore to talk about gender without taking into consideration all other aspects of our identity, then in all cases, but especially in the case of migration, shape our privilege and our level of marginalization. And of course, in the case of South Africa, we mainly focus on race and nationality, and has been prioritized because it was in the specific context of xenophobia and Afrophobia against migrants in the country. But what I was saying impressed me, it was a lot of discussion were also made around the aspects of religion. Something else that I think remain something a big takeaway from the participants was how much importance and how much more emphasis should be given to migrants agencies and contributions, and stop focusing and moving forwards on the vulnerabilities focused type of narratives. I think they were really impressed about all the discussion that are around it, and this was a big take away and a moment of reflection for them. Something else that also I think was a very a successful point of the training was the fact that was this mix in between media professionals. I was saying for civil society organizations, NGOs, and researcher. And it was super interesting when we asked them to rewrite or to draft from the scratch some new article about gender migration or about a specific gender-based violence episode. And I think the work, these all different categories working together really enrich the point of view and also the quality of the output. And I think it also gave them a sense of how much this type of connection are important in order to cover stories that really go in deep in the structural issues of migration and do not only focus on the single event. And the last point that I want to highlight around the training was that another big discussion and takeaway, I think, for participants, it's how much is important to create space for migrants' voices, especially women that, as we said before, are underrepresented or migrant with diverse subjects. And also a lot of discussions, especially in the context of South Africa, was about the challenges, the great challenges that still women journalists encounter in covering a story about migration, in reporting about migration. That's it from my side. And if you need further, if you have further question, you will find me here still on the Q&A.
Thank you so much, Martina. Thank you. I really like the examples that you brought in terms of images, language, and how even just one single word can make the difference, right? When we tell the stories of these people. And also another interesting point, it's related to privacy. I think that's also a very important one when we tell these stories, really to pay attention not to expose them even more. And yeah, really great that you presented this course. If anybody here is new to this topic and would like to become more intentional in their work when communicating about migrants and women, really take this online course. I think it's great, it's free. It's a short one, but I think it already gives a good basis to start, and also the certificate, it's good. So I think it's a great concrete way in which we can help improve, all of us, these kind of narratives. So thank you again, Martina. Now, I would like to turn to Marcela Gabiu. Marcela is a gender and communication consultant with a background in communication sciences and international economic relations. She's also the director of the specialization program in gender and diversity policies at the National University of Mar del Plata. And moreover, she's the producer of the podcast Path Towards a Fulfilling Life, focusing on experiences of migrant women, including deported and returned individuals. And she serves as co-coordinator of the Global Media Monitoring Project in Argentina with WACC, which is one of the co-organizers of this event. So over to you, Marcela.
Thank you very much. I'm going to share to my presentation. Good morning, and thank you very much for the opportunity to be part of this closing panel of communication rights and experience and narratives from a race-based perspective. The project Camino hacia una vida plena, Path Toward a Fulfilling Life, emerged in 2024 following my coverage of an event organized by ACT Alliance, a network that brings together numerous faith-based organizations. During that event, key discussions focused on human mobility and climate justice, and it became clear to me that there were much more to be said, particularly regarding the experiences of women, girls, and adolescents in this context. As a result, I developed a project within WAC Latin America, where I was until recently a member of the regional executive committee structure around three components. First, a podcast featuring the voices of migrant women who cross the Darien Gap, alongside perspective from organizations working on these issues and communicators reflecting on both the challenges and the best practice covering human mobility. Second, a training component, addressing the difficulties organizations face in communicating these issues, as well as the barriers communicators encounter in incorporating them into the public agenda. We produce 8 episodes, podcasts, following this structure with a strong focus on women's voices and leaderships. And you have here, they are in Spanish, but they said one in the move, data, real people, the health of people on the move is the number 3. The hope for a different future, number 4. Migrant childhoods, information in human mobility, and what, how, and where people access information. And you are not alone on this journey is number 7. And how and now what, which concludes by addressing what lies ahead for the Global Compact for Migration following its review in Chile. For this interview, I traveled in November 2024 to the Lajas Blancas camp operated by the United Nations and together with other faith-based organizations. They conducted humanitarian work. There I carried out the interviews and spoke directly with the women staying at the camp. Third, the development of the catalog, like our colleague.
Camino hacia una vida plena.
I don't know why. Yeah. The catalogs have 10 points, of course. We try to do the same thing to thought how the journalists have to report these issues. And the first, of course, is I can share it after, but I give you a review. Place people in human mobility at the center. Second, make the visibility. I'm sorry. Yes. Third, language. should be less technical, more accessible people in situation of human mobility. Fourth, for the first person voice, the people in situation of mobility already have a voice. Listen to their experience, understand their needs and challenges, and amplify their voices through communications, always ensuring dignity, representations, and respect for the identified. Number five, contextualize human mobility and its associating risk are the result of political and social process. So we have to talk about that. Then you break the chain of information. And number seven, expand the narratives. And number eight, media networks prioritize communications challenges with greater reach and benefits for people in mobility, such as local community media and digital platforms. Number five, strategy collaborations. If journalists work within a civil society organization, engage with journalists to disseminate information that supports the rights of people in humanity. And of course, number 10, conviction and ethical responsibility. Political and economic constraints often limited funding for this agenda, more in these days. Journalists and communicators' commitment to human rights continue this work thanks to the networks they have built to address these challenges. In the second phase of the project, we aim to amplify the voices of deported and returning women, as you see, those who were in the route when CBP1 applications was discontinued, as well as those currently being deported. I'd like to share, I shared that video for this stage. I traveled to Guatemala and Mexico, working in coordination with organizations engaged on the ground to facilitate access to interviews with women. Most have stayed in shelters or review support from civil society and faith-based organization. I also interviewed organizations leaders to better understand the current realities shaping human mobility. For this event, I prepare a story. You have here the last of the episodes. Number 10 was about abducted, the woman who were kidnapping. Number 11, the expectation of sacrifice of women, because they take care even when they left their homes. They take care at distance. Episode number 12, deportation, who gets deported and how, because in the United States, the person who were deported was different between another years. And number 30, yes, education and healthcare for migrant children, myth or reality. And for this event, I prepared one of the stories of the woman I interview, who is currently in a regular situation in Manhattan, and I met her yesterday. And ACT Alliance create this beautiful flyer to distribute at the side panel they organize. We felt it was important to present real stories about real people and to highlight the impacts of failing to uphold the global compact of migration. Every story, every voice matters. Listening attentively with empathy and respect, it was enable people to share their experience with us. It's about placing them at the center, not those of us holding microphones or recording devices. At the same time, it is important to acknowledge that we are not unfavored. What we hear affects us deeply because we are human. For that reason, developing self-caring strategy after conducting interviews is essential. Honoring spaces for rest, joy, and well-being is not an optional. It is a feminist achievement that we must uphold. Taking care of ourselves also means being ready to listen to the next story. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marcela. Thank you so much for sharing with us this incredible project, your podcast, all the guides step by step for communication professionals who want really to communicate in the right way, these kind of things. I think it's super interesting and also like super important, I think, to, as you said, to listen to this story in an empathic way, to really put ourselves in the shoes of these people. And I think this can already be something that help us share these stories in a more human and in a more neutral way. So thank you so much for sharing this. And if you want, also feel free to put the link of your podcast in the chat so that it's easier for people in case they didn't have the time to take a screenshot of the QR code. Let's so before I introduce our last speaker, I would like to also show you a 2-minute video recently launched by UN Women on harmful myths and stereotypes surrounding migrant women, which I think fit very well the conversation that we have today. So maybe I can ask Carolina to share the screen with the video.
We hear a lot about migration, numbers, routes, borders, threats. But when was the last time you heard a story that showed a migrant woman as more than just a stereotype? The world rarely hears the real stories of women on the move. Instead, what we are told about them, who they are, what they do, why they migrate, is often misleading or quite simply false. It's time to look closer. Now. Myths about migrant women can be devastating. They shape how they are seen, the risks they face, and the doors that open for them or stay closed. For migrant women, myths make life harder and less safe. Instead, we need to see the courage, hope, strength, and resilience of migrant women. The decision for migrant women to leave their homes, families, and communities is not one they take lightly. They move to support themselves and their families, to find safety, hope, and to build a better future, often facing incredible risks along the way. Many work in nursing, domestic work, and caregiving, roles essential to our everyday lives, but are also exposed to harsh working conditions and minimal labor protections. They hold families together. They strengthen communities. They bring knowledge, ideas, and new perspectives. And they help societies grow and thrive. It's time for a narrative that replaces misconceptions with facts and goes beyond limited ideas of what they can do. A narrative that shows how powerful, self-determined, and capable migrant women are, and how indispensable they are for a just, safe, and sustainable future across borders and beyond. It's time to break these myths now.
We already have some questions in the chat, which is great. Let me start by the first one from Maisa, who was wondering whether avoiding the term victim too strongly may sometimes risk obscuring structures of violence and responsibilities. So I think this question is mostly for Martina, but I'm really happy for anyone to jump in if they want to reply. She also gave a bit more context of why this question came up, so you can find more details in the chat, but this is the main thing. So I give you the floor.
Yes, I had a quick look and it's a super interesting, it's not even a question, I don't know, it's a reflection. So thank you so much for pointing it out. I have to say that when I deliver training, the great things are doing with professionals. It's that bringing their expertise, they open a lot of ideas and reflections. So you always come back enriched. And I feel also from this panel conversation, I will be back enriched. I can say a couple of things about this. I don't have an answer, let's say. One thing that I can say is that, as I said before, there were several recommendations that I have, but I have to keep it in 15 minutes. One other recommendation that to me is very important is to be sure to do not remove the responsibility from the perpetrator. So I made example about the word to choose because I think they were the easiest one and the one that I'm used to ask by communication specialists or media professionals. But actually, the use of, for example, passive or active voice, it's also super important because, if we say she was a victim or she was trafficked by them, we are still almost putting the responsibility on the victim or the person that has been trafficked, but shifting the voice and say they trafficked her, we are shifting the responsibility on the perpetrator. So I think here it's more like, let's say, broader discourse. So not just about the word to choose, but a lot of choices that you can do in order to be sure to keep the responsibility on the perpetrator, because the responsibility of the act, that could be a person or a state or whatever, it's on the perpetrator. And another thing that I want to highlight that comes from the consultation meeting that I had. So I forgot to say, but before developing the e-course, I had a lot of interviews with practitioners working in the field, but also with media professionals and with migrants being interviewed. And something that I think we forget is asking them. So one very important question is, which word do you want I refer when I talk about you? Another recommendation that I skipped was about a human-based approach when we are reporting on migration. And I think it's about not seeing the migrants as the object of our articles or our media outlet, but as human beings that, as we were saying before, as an active, is an agent of powers. And the migrants need to have a voice in the way they want to be, their story should be told. And a lot of migrants told me that some professionals come already with a kind of frame or a story already built, and they try to include their story in this frame, and then they feel like they have to play a part in order to fit in this story. So this is a very good reflection, and probably when we're talking about narratives and telling story about migrants, I would ask them which word do you prefer.
Thank you, super clear, Martina. Does anyone from the speaker want to add something? Edita, yes, I see you.
Yes. Hi, hello everyone, and sorry for jumping in so late, but it was really exciting to be able to attend at least the last part of the presentations. And what Martina was saying, I totally agree with. The fact that we should be very mindful of how we use the language, which implicitly might attribute responsibility about what is going on. And I really find this comment from the participants quite insightful, because very often what happens is that let's say hard experiences or victimization experiences are there. The thing with these experiences becoming a determinant factor when we talk about migrant women or even men, when we talk about migrants and refugees, is that it becomes quite stigmatizing. And so there is, it's not the fact that we should not talk about the difficult experiences that these people very often go through. These are facts, and which should not be ignored. The problem with that becomes when we overrepresent them with, and we overrepresent them as victims rather than as people that have also a lot of resources to let's say face what is going on, and to face these difficulties. From my own experience, I very often have come across, and we also study in psychology, traumatic experiences quite often also do trigger a lot of resources that might be individual but also collective, that quite often bring people to also grow out of so catalyze, let's say, a number of resources that are necessary to let's say, to face these experiences. So I think the problem is not talking about these kind of experiences, but the problem is when we really focus our the narratives or the way that we see these people, and we over-identify them through these experiences. And I do totally agree with the fact that people do not like to be seen as victims, even when very difficult experiences, happen to them. Very difficult life events do happen to them, because these are parts of the life. So there's also a whole range of capacities that need to be recognized. So in between these two poles, victims or success stories, I think there's so many nuances that we are missing. And why? Because what happens is that in order to balance, this way of viewing and depicting these people, we go full-fledged on the other side. No, we need to focus on the success stories. So because no, victim. So the stress on the victim is bad. We are really stigmatizing these people, and so we go over the other side and we focus on the success stories, and we really risk exactly doing the same. Success stories focusing on society are also very stigmatizing. They put a lot of pressure on these people because they have to be these success models on top of the very same difficulties that they are going through. Sometimes they are really facing very hard living conditions, and they also have to be success stories, and they also have to be models, role models to inspire people. I mean, so this is what goes on when we are trying to balance very stigmatizing narratives and very narrow-minded ways of looking at these people. So it's not that I have an answer, but what I see as problematic is really this polarization, these polarizations that I also see happening also like coming out of the need to really balance a very, very polarized narrative. And by very well-intentioned also, let's say, actors really want to, provide a more positive image, let's say, or representation of these people. But what I say is, we really need to have a lot of nuances in between these poles. The victim stories are there. The victimization is there because these stories are real. These events are real. And we also have really very inspiring success stories, but not necessarily we should focus on these. We should focus on really normal life stories, whatever happens in between these poles. So this is my take, and this is where their voices come in. So gathering their stories, wherever they are placed in this continuum. Are they really the success story? Are they somewhere in between? Both. I mean, they can be both victims of very, very difficult life experiences and demonstrate a lot of resilience and, have success. But, this is what we are trying to also look at our research with Alice that presented before. And so there's no simple solution to that, but I think this is where our efforts should be placed.
Thank you, Rita. Thank you for your input. I think it also replies very well to our the other question that we had about success and how to balance all these things. There is no black and white. There is no easy solution. So thank you very much. Super on point. Abigail, I saw your hands raised.
Thank you. I just wanted to come in here. I think this was a really important point that Edith also mentioned. It's about nuances, right? And I think to expand on this, there's two other elements to mention. Migration doesn't end when migrant woman or man or whoever arrives at their point of destination. The experience is a continuing from pre-migration, from transit, from destination, and from return. So when we talk about stories and what is a migrant woman's experiences, for example, we can't limit it to what's their experience in that moment. It's a continuation. What will be their experience after their journey? So it feeds into this idea of nuance. We need to move away from these polarization with one side or the other side, and also knowing the story doesn't end there. So, and having that sort of stepping back, when we design our programs, when we design our communications, our words have impact, our programs have impact, our policies have impact. So knowing that the journey doesn't end there is very important. And then I also just wanted to add that, one of the challenges is a very real lack of evidence and real data that's either sex disaggregated or gender statistics on migration. What are the real situations and lived experiences? And I think strengthening this at different national levels through civil society, through national governments and other counterparts, statistic bureaus, researchers, academics, having a better understanding of the gendered experience of migration through actual data and statistics helps to shape, how you go into these conversations, how journalists are equipped to interview migrant women, etc. So I just wanted to add that point. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Abigail. And yeah, I think we can conclude today's section. Thank you so much to our speakers for all your contribution, to the participants for the question. I think today what we can bring with us at home is really how these stories have such a big role in shaping the perception, the policies, and also how they impact people's life. And I also hope we all feel now more responsible to promote gender responsive and intersectional narratives when we communicate and when we share these stories. So thank you again, everyone, for joining us today. I don't know if Carolina has something to say. If not, I wish you...
Thank you, Chiara and Carolina, for organizing this, moderating this, such an important event. So thank you for bringing us together, really.
Of course, of course. Thank you, everyone. Have a nice end of the day continuation. Bye.
Thank you very much. Take care.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. See you. Bye-bye. Thank you.